Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Captain America Sentinel of Liberty issue 4. And I actually really enjoyed this issue. It was actually a very well constructed one that we got some stuff with Steve and Bucky. We got Steve kind of doing what would probably confuse a lot of people, being like just talking with people, figuring out his kind of views on like the Shield, the American Dream, and America generally, while then getting us into an action piece at the end with like the redacted popping back up into play. So it's really kind of cool that you could essentially look at this issue and be like, there's a lot of plot development that happens, there's a lot of character stuff that we see going on as well as some good action scenes as well. I'm like, yes please. So we pretty much see that Steve is kind of thinking about this whole kind of concept of everything in its right place, this kind of phrase that his mother would bring up as everything in its right place to God's kind of plan. And then he's thinking, okay, it kind of like she would put that out when she wanted him to clean his room and all that. And he's thinking about that with all of these other kind of places where that saying would make sense. And then, like Einstein with his relativity, Phineas Horton with the Human Torch, and then these last couple days, the message left on his shield was it God's plan that his mother was doing, or was it the outer circles? And then it's like, okay, yeah, what are we really doing with certain kind of things if you've got these people doing all these kind of plays that are even behind the scenes that you don't even know about? It's like, yes, good to think about that, Steve. And then we see that Bucky is pretty much trying to figure out what's going on as well through the like Starpoint kind of stuff, kind of talking with his cat and everything, which was nice. And it's funny because he's just got like a headache and everything, and then someone knocks on the door and he's like, all right, I go for the gut, you go for the face with his cat. And then he's like, all right, you can tell the cat to stand down. And Steve's like, hey, he thought it was time for them to talk and everything. And it's like, yes, Steve, yes. And then we get this nice layout. I've really liked this effective use of this like 9-panel kind of like layout that they've got here. And because you get sometimes this good kind of shot where you've got like this just one scene, and then you get some movement and everything, and it just works really well, as we see that Steve pretty much lays out the whole outer circle kind of stuff, understanding that there's 5 players and that he got the encrypted message from the Shield, and that they were going to use him, and like he's figuring out that like the entire world is stuck on this shield, like the outer circle, and then the rest of us surrounded, and we step out of line. Bucky's then like, they send someone like me, as he then brings up the whole stuff with the star points and everything, and that he kind of got it together with the new destroyer, calling him the Great Sentry Weapon, and that of course, Bucky always has a complex history with the Winter Soldier, and then finding this on top of it is an interesting kind of development. He's thinking it's just another aspect of his god-awful legacy. And he didn't know about the circle, and he didn't want to drag Steve into it. And you see it really here, where he's like tearing up because he thought he was alone with it. And it's like, yeah, he deals with all this shit by himself. But then you get Steve being like, you've been my best friend for 80 years. Thought you would have learned this by now. You never fight alone. As you get a really nice hug, and you see the cat rubbing up against Bucky too. And it's like, yes, that's what Steve does. And it's like, yeah, all right, that's Catman. And it's cool to see that. And so they make a plan together, and it's like, all right, cool. And of course, they've got their risks and everything, and we got this cool little thing where she's like, I think it's Amari's mom thanking Steve for walking him to school, saying that he's her second favorite Captain America, and I love that Steve's like, no worries, Sam's my favorite too, and I'm just like, yes, that's awesome that Sam would be Steve's favorite Cap. I'm like, yeah, all right. And then we see that like every word has to be perfect, every move made carefully, and it's like, oh, okay. And we start seeing this, and he's got the shield on his back. He's asking Amari if he's excited to go back to school. He's like, yeah, I'm excited to try out the kind of haymaker and everything. And he's like, listen to me. And he then starts explaining that the training we've been doing, it's not to show off. And then he starts bringing up the mistakes that he made back in the day, and that he went after the fight. He struck first and thought it was being a real hero. But then, of course, the bullies got a bloody nose or two, and it taught them what he was capable of, and they compensated for his strength. They got their strength together, and they struck first, and it wasn't just him that suffered. And I really like him explaining to Amari that you don't want to just use violence and be caught up in that cycle. And it's really cool that he kind of like brought up, heck, the day I learned to fight back, I practically punched every Nazi on the planet before supper. And he brings up that violence isn't a tool. It's not a cool thing to show off. It's a cycle. And the more you feed it, the hungrier it gets, and eventually it'll bite back. And then he's like questioning, then why the heck would you show me doing all this in that smelly-ass gym? Because when the fight comes to you, you'll be ready, and you'll put it down hard and fast. And it's like, yes, being ready for a fight is not the same as going out and just doing violence for the sake of violence, or just to show off. And I really like Steve's wording of, you'll tell that violence there's no place for you in the cycle, and you can focus on what really matters, your future. And seeing him kind of think about that is kind of cool. So we'll kind of see what goes on with that, and it's just cool for him to do that. And then we see him bringing up that they're in his art class, and he's asking what the shield means to them. And it's funny because one person's like, fuck, it's a real son of a bitch to render properly, as they're like drawing this shield, which was kind of cool. But I like how we get all these different kind of views on it. Like, it means America, stars and stripes. Then someone else bringing up left, right, red, white, and blue. I get mine, you get yours, don't tread on me kind of stuff. And then the other guy's like, oh, you don't want to badmouth the dream there in front of Captain America. And Steve knows, he's been fighting them white supremacists longer than we've been alive. It's like, yeah, he has. And then they're like, okay, so he brings up that, like, it's a symbol of corruption and injustice, sure, but also hope. That there's a lot of different kind of feelings depending upon who you are in America of what the shield means. It's like, it's good. Now, granted, it's kind of complex to do in like one kind of page, but we kind of understand what Steve's doing later on as we get there. And then, of course, it brings up the important part of, what does this shield mean to you, Steve? And it's like, yeah, what does it? And then, of course, we get into this kind of bar place that's like a union kind of place, and what it means to other people as well in this kind of interesting kind of bar place. And you kind of see that Steve is trying to get them to express their kind of viewpoints and what they mean more exactly. Because you see the dude being like, we eat the rich, then we save the damn planet. And I like his kind of small little joke. Afraid cannibalism is going to do much for your position, Arlo. And he's talking about it's not like actual cannibalism, it's like a way of thinking. But you kind of need to explain that because of what Steve's trying to kind of do. And bringing up like how the neighborhood started as slave country, and then like the gangland mobsters and everything, and like this whole kind of fire where all these people died for like profit margins. And then Steve bringing up like, but that's the point of law, isn't it, to square the reality in our deals? You want all these socialist reforms, why not wait and let the system do its job? And he brings up that like the system didn't allow slavery, the system didn't get rid of the mob, and it sure as hell didn't fix the profit margins. And he's talking about how the little guy did those kind of things. And see, this is kind of really interesting because this is kind of like philosophical argument 101 kind of stuff, where you get somebody to explain more of their position by presenting certain different kind of counter arguments, and that's kind of what Steve is. So that way this guy Arlo can more accurately expound his position, and talking about like socialism and a union bar, and like how the military has stuff, and like Steve is a product of the military and everything like that. And Steve, of course, is bringing up, oh, so I'm supposed to take everything the country gave me and shove it back in its face. But he's like, no, you use your power as you damn well please. And since you're a good man, you'll use it to help the most people. Because if I know anything, it's this. Just because they made you, sure as hell doesn't mean they own you. And that's kind of bringing up like what Steve in the Outer Circle is kind of trying to contend with. And then we see that he comes out of the bar, and we see that the Redacted's been there the whole day, and that this has been Steve pretty much. He's like, you could have attacked me at a lot of different points, and that the dude was not making any sound throughout the day, and that there were various points that the dude could have like attacked and really took Steve out, and all of that. Going through logically how Steve was figuring out his movements and everything, how he pulled back because you learned real fast that he's a morning person. Amari, probably the first chance to catch me off guard. The class, high chance collateral damage. My attention would have been split. You could have easily taken hostages, but you both times you just watched. He thinks the orders are to kill me, but I think you're choosing not to kill anyone else. And then he pretty much walked himself into a box canyon to kind of like see what goes on. And then we shift to them fighting through, and I do like, I'm getting used to this, and I'm kind of liking this way for certain action, though I do like kind of like traditional ones, but it's kind of cool to see the flow and everything going on here. And he's like, you're to be redacted and everything. And it's like, yeah, those are your orders, can't argue with that. You haven't just been following me, you've been listening to every word I've said, and hoping that he's paid attention because he was talking to him the whole time as everything's kind of going through and trying to figure out what's going on. He's like, okay, you're not a thing. You're not a monster or machine. Know that you think the circle is your life. And believe it or not, you're choosing to follow them. That's what they don't understand about us. Everyone who laughs and thinks and lives inside the circle, all of us, we can choose our place. And that's a pretty big thing. And I kind of like that they were able to kind of build up to that. It's an important kind of thing to showcase, and it's really kind of cool to see it done in this comic. And he, of course, you have to fight for it, and it might not be perfect. But if we have each other's backs, you can stand free. And he doesn't know him or what's happened to him, as he's like pretty much putting him into like a position that he's not completely taking him out, but he's like fighting him physically but also argumentatively, and it's like, that's kind of cool. And then he asks him, and probably like the first time, what place do you choose? And he's going to them wherever they are, and they're playing a game, meticulous, precise, and he's going to flip the table. And he asks him if he wants to help, and they both like they grasp hands, and it's like, all right. I really like it when they're able to do this kind of thing. I mean, granted, this is kind of a thing that's in Naruto Talk No Jutsu, where you are able to talk an enemy into helping you do something or helping you with a cause. But when it's done like this and executed very well, and it doesn't feel stupid or plot demandsy, that's always a cool thing to achieve. Now, granted, other people could feel that like this was kind of preachy, and I get that it is plot demandsy. It just doesn't feel that way to me. So then we see that the Star Point R is offline as the Revolution is like, who would have thought that would happen so soon? As he then shifts to make his, he asks the table to convene for his broadcast for his move, Revolution, Captain America to the Shadow Capital, final move. So we'll kind of have to see what that kind of does and what is going to kind of happen out with that. I do want to see what the dynamic of the redacted Star Point is, if they really do feel like they have been swayed by Cap's argument, if this is some kind of subterfuge to screw them over at some other kind of pivotal point. We'll kind of have to see with that, but I did like how he did this kind of different kind of route for this villain to get them to kind of work with them against the Outer Circle and what that's going to kind of entail. It's cool when you can balance like the philosophical arguments of what goes on with like physical action as well. That is a hard thing to do, and that's like the strength that I really liked in this issue, and think that they did a very good job on that. It's hard to do that because sometimes if you go too much into the philosophical stuff, it gets kind of boring to read, and you're kind of like, oh, you got to just like word vomit certain kind of things to get certain kind of concepts out there. That's if you dig really deep. And then sometimes you just have all action or whatnot. That balance was a key thing here that I really liked and really enjoyed, and liked to see him getting all these different kind of things, focusing on certain things with like what the shield meant for the class students, what it meant for the guys like Arlo at the Union Bar, and what it kind of means to teach someone to defend themselves like Amari. It's all these kind of stuff going on, and then it was just really nice to get good character moments with Steve and Bucky where they get all their information out that they've got so far, and they just work together to get this done, and I can't wait to see more of that going forward. So those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.